Hi everyone and welcome back to Wina Wonders. So today I'm going to be doing my August to be read video or my August TBR, and I think I mentioned this in a previous video where recently my attitude toward TBRs has really shifted and has just really been sort of renewed, and I don't think of it anymore as like setting yourself up for disappointment. I think about it more as reaching for the stars, and if you don't hit your goal, if you fall short, then at least you're still able to read a lot and you're still able to learn a lot. So yeah, for those of you guys who are not from the Philippines, August is typically Buwan ng Wika, or like National Filipino Language Month in short. And so for this month, I thought that I would do something special and make a TBR that's exclusively composed of books by Filipino authors. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a while and kind of grappling with, because as you guys may know, I've been incorporating more Filipino authors into what I read every month, just because I feel like it's strange that Filipino authors can be so underrepresented in consciousness of Filipinos themselves. And the more and more I sort of dig into this wealth of research about Philippine literature, I just have a hard time kind of justifying reading like foreign authors and not including people who are actually from here, who talk about the Filipino experience, whether it be diaspora or colonization or just day-to-day life, and sort of where history meets current day and where that's gonna take us. So yeah, this TBR is very near and dear to my heart, and without further ado, let's get into the books. So all of these are books that I've owned for a while, but they've just not made it onto my TBR for one reason or another. There have been times where I just wasn't in the headspace for them, and then other times where there were just other books that I was prioritizing. So yeah, first is Illustrado by Miguel Sihuco. I feel like everyone and their mother has read this book, so soon I will be inculcated into the group of people who have read it. And this basically won a bunch of prizes a couple of years ago. I think it was around 2014 or 2015. And basically this book sort of explores what it means to be a modern-day Ilustrado and why Filipinos are kind of so obsessed with leaving the country, with getting sort of validation from outside, but then also what that means when we come back and like how it filters into our identity. And I know that there are a lot of like very interesting things about the format of this book as well, so I'm really interested in diving into that and finding out more about what Mr. Miguel Sihuco has to say about being an Ilustrado. Next is Insurrecto by Gina Apostol. So the thing about this book is that I heard a lot about it, mostly from my friends who are Phil-Am. So my friends who are Filipino by heritage but are currently living in America, and they were telling me that this is a really good book to read. At first that kind of surprised me, just because my experience with Gina Apostol is that, you know, she's the kind of author that your professors would invite you to go to her book launch, etc. So I was really happy when I found out she was also making waves abroad. And I previously did review a book of hers on this channel, which was The Gun Dealer's Daughter. I didn't really enjoy it, but I know that her other books are really good, like The Revolution According to Raimundo Mata. That one is like super famous, and my friend Noel did his undergrad thesis on that. And my friend Ram also says that he thinks Gina Apostol is the greatest living Filipino novelist. And so yeah, I just want to read more from her, and I have a feeling I'll like this a lot more. This has to do with film and kind of, I guess, the experience of filming a movie that's about Filipino history. And that's very interesting to me, especially because in the past 5 or 6 years, I feel like we really had a resurgence in films that explore Filipino history, with things like General Luna and Goyo, which was about Gregorio del Pilar, who was like the hero of Tirad Paz. He was a young general, and he basically was massacred. So yes, very grim history, but you know, what history isn't grim? And I'm very, very excited to read this. Okay, up next, this is Marion Bad by Chiles Samaniego. So Chiles is an author that I met through reviewing his book. I have a review of his previous book, which is called Millennium. Here, this book, Millennium. I reviewed this a couple of years ago, and Chiles reached out to me through Instagram, I think, and since then we've sort of become friends on the gram. And he sent this to me back in January 2020, and I just haven't gotten around to reading it. Chiles likes to write in very unique formats, so I opened this up and I saw this immediately, where you know, he uses lines, he uses graphs, and his previous book is shaped like a cassette tape, and the names of the stories, or like the segments in the back, are also presented the way that you would probably look at the track list. And it's just interesting. It's like a novel, but in a very different format, and his narrative is usually not very linear, and that's something I'm very interested in exploring, especially in the context of the Filipino body of work. So yes, super excited to read that. Next is a classic, because I thought that I also want to enrich my Filipino vocabulary, or my Tagalog vocabulary. I'm so sick of this thing, which I think the middle class here in the Philippines is very, very I guess, like, guilty of, and I myself have been guilty of this in the past, where we always say like, oh yeah, we have like a very post-colonial education system, the medium of instruction is in English, I'm not really good at speaking in Tagalog, and then we do this thing where it's like the opposite of a humble brag. Instead of humble bragging, you kind of proud shame, where you're like, oh, I'm so embarrassed, I don't really know how to speak Tagalog properly. So, you know, I don't want to be that person anymore. And Luahati Bautista is one of my favorite authors in Filipino. This is Bata Bata Paano Ka Ginawa, and I just really want to read this again. Actually, we were required to read this when we were in high school. And there's a film adaptation, which is one of my favorites. I might actually do like a whole separate video on this, or maybe on Luahati Bautista if I have time, and hopefully that will be in Tagalog, and I'll have the patience to provide subtitles for that. The next books are more recent acquisitions, and these are books that I've been hearing about as well for a long time, but which I didn't really get around to picking up until lately, when all of these university presses started going online, and it was suddenly so easy to kind of get my hands on these books. So this first one is Cursed and Other Stories by Noel Q. de Jesus. I've heard a lot about Noel de Jesus, and the blurb on this, I'm a blurb ho, is by Mia Alvar, who wrote In the Country, which is one of my favorite books. So this one is actually published by Penguin, so that's very interesting, and I'm excited to read this. Up next is a book by Glenn Diaz. So Glenn is someone who also kind of publishes in the academic sort of circles, but also in the independent publishing scene here in the Philippines. And he also comes out with very interesting zines, or like commentaries, articles that I have seen online. And this is his novel, The Quiet Ones. I'm so excited for this. First of all, like, beautiful cover, and I really like the way that this is laid out. I like the font, and I'm just really interested to read about this, because it follows BPO or call center workers, and I feel like there haven't been enough stories or books about that, especially in the past few years or so, when BPO work has just become sort of normal for us, and we're sort of over that wave in the early 2000s where everyone was like, oh my god, like, call centers are the future. Yeah, so I'm very interested in what Glenn has to say about that. And last but not the least, which is actually probably the first book that I might read, if not Insurrecto, or if not Illustrator, I don't know. This is Culture and History by Nick Joaquin. So Nick Joaquin is an author that almost every person that's gone through the Filipino education system will know about, because he is one of those canonical writers. But the thing is, I think, of the entire Filipino canon, of course barring like Jose Rizal, I think that Nick Joaquin is someone that really deserves his place in that canon, just because, number one, he was such a prolific writer, and the work that he produced was across a number of different genres. So he has a lot of essays, he has a lot of more social political commentary and like journalistic work. And then of course he also has his short stories, like the very famous Summer Solstice and May Day Eve. And then he also has some novels as well that are very interesting and which are also in a way sort of social commentaries in themselves. And last but not the least, I think Nick Joaquin has a very interesting perspective because he sort of witnessed the transition from American colonialization, and just being able to sort of situate yourself in that middle generation that was going through that change. I feel like he has a lot to say about that, and I feel like he really was able to look at what it means to be Filipino from a lens that was coming out of that colonialization and moving towards something that I think now is actually still like a semi-colonization, because we're not entirely free, and everyone who's Filipino will know that and will tell you that that we are still very much kind of recovering from this trauma that I think is colonialization. So yes, I'm very interested in reading this, and I plan on making a separate video as well on Nick Joaquin and just discussing his body of work, but I want to refresh my memory first and make sure that I do it justice. So yeah, I'm very excited for this month. You know, maligayang Buwan ng Wika to all of you Filipinos out there. And I know that Tagalog is also sort of the Imperial Manila's language or dialect, and there are a lot of languages and dialects in the entire Philippines, and this is just one of them. And yeah, nonetheless, I think it's still interesting to explore, and I still think it's good getting to know even just a bit of our heritage, right? Okay, so I think I've rambled on for long enough. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and yeah, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to tell me down below what books you're reading, even if it's not necessarily by a Filipino author. Or even better, if you are reading a book by a Filipino author, please let me know what it is down below, and if you enjoyed it, what you thought of it. Bye!